I read a short story last week where the dialogue was really bad, enough that I keep thinking about it. And as a game and audio drama writer and actor, dialogue happens to be one of my areas of expertise. Let's fucking go. First, you have to consider that everyone talks a little bit differently. Our speech patterns are a result of our upbringing, our region, our age, our generation, our level of education, our social circles, and there's so many small factors. Fucking haircut and it's driving me crazy. Okay. I'm from the South, but I'm from the urban South. I sound way different than the rural South. And I also sound different from my dad's family in rural Maine. Because of my parents' education coming down onto me, my casual conversation, even as a kid, had a larger vocabulary than a lot of my peers. People speaking their second language often structure their sentences differently or use a slightly different vocabulary than a native speaker. Because so much of our personality comes through in how we speak or maybe don't speak, getting that right creates more depth to a character. It can also be a massive element of world building in a situation where you need to build a world. If all the elves have uneducated dialogue, well, that tells you the standing of elves in a setting. If you want more examples, or we want to go into more detail about how we take dialogue and make it work in our stories, stick around because this is not the end. This is not the end. I'm coming back. Alright, so we've talked about different characters having different speech patterns. So how do we take those ideas and turn them into nice sounding dialogue? Because the idea is not that we're necessarily creating like hyper realistic dialogue, because that's boring. We stutter, we start, we reiterate, we repeat. That wouldn't be fun to read. Like, go read a court transcript and you'll see what I'm talking about. So what we're really looking for is to create organic dialogue. It's a sort of idealized version of realistic dialogue that sounds like somebody actually said it, but is still nice to read. Our day-to-day normal speech is imperfect, interactive, and improvised. Speech is imperfect. We do not talk naturally, grammatically correct. We fragment our sentences. We run them on. We don't finish. We use the wrong word, or maybe almost the right word, but not quite. We screw up our verb-noun agreement. And no matter how many times you've been corrected by a teacher or a parent, at some point in your life, you're gonna say, me and him went to the store. So while overdoing it can be frustrating to read, because again, we're not looking for hyperrealism, scattering in imperfections makes the dialogue sound more real. It's also interactive in a number of different ways. People are talking, they're not just standing there with their arms at their sides, staring forward. People are swaying on their feet, they're talking with their hands, they're using gestures to replace words, they're putting their fingers through their hair, they're shoving up their glasses, they're sighing and shrugging silently and looking away. Because dialogue isn't necessarily just about the words, it's about conveying communication. And we use a lot of nonverbal communication. So incorporating multiple methods of communication makes the overall dialogue feel a little more relaxed. It's also common that other things are occurring while you're having a conversation. Someone's cooking, someone's cleaning, someone's sewing. So taking the conversation and spreading it over a real life event makes the conversation itself feel more natural, because that's how we actually do things. Our day-to-day speech is also completely and totally improvised. We are always making up the words we say. Do you know what the next words you're gonna say are? We are constantly acting within and reacting to outside stimulus. So while you, as a writer, know what your characters are gonna say, your characters don't. If you stick with me, I will run you through how I personally write dialogue using all these things we've already talked about, and we can explore what that looks like. Pew pew pew! Until next time. See, that was improv. I didn't know I was going to do that, and it's very stupid now that I've already done it. I'm just going to leave it in, though, so you understand. Remember how I said I'd come back to dialogue? Today's the day. We're going to do a little bit of a case study with two characters from Fruit Salad Theory, which is the game I released today. This is Angel and Gingerbread. They are both roughly 19, both inheritors of great fortunes, but have some major differences. Angel was technically raised in the mundane world, He was brought to the quote-unquote fantasy setting when he found out that he was secretly an inheritor of a major estate. Before the story began, he was living a pretty typical teenage boy, suburban Arizona kind of life. Gingerbread is a goblin who has been raised in this setting, has known they were inheritor of this estate the whole life, has been raised to be the inheritor of this major estate. When they first meet each other, Angel greets here first with, "I like your dress. It's really cool." Modern dialogue because he's a modern boy. Gingerbread comes back with, "Oh, thank you. I did the beadwork myself. I love your vest. All the Fey children's stitching is just phenomenal." Gingerbread responds this way because that is how Gingerbread has been trained to respond in polite society. This is them talking about interworld travel and gate hopping, which is something that all these characters in this setting can do. Angel's very new to it. You'll notice Angel uses the word planet. Gingerbread uses the word world. Angel thinks of them as physical planets in space, while to Gingerbread, they're just different worlds you go between. I don't understand what the big deal is. You see that here too when they're talking about moving through these gates. Angel, walking my ass through a fucking wormhole. Gingerbread is just like, well, labeling the gates off. Oh, I go from Pelauta Gate to Ariocano's Gate. Oh, it's so very easy. Well, their concepts of these places physically in space are different, and that's reflected in the way they refer to them. Here they are talking about the different species at the ball. There are elves and giant ferrets and whatever the fuck chicory is. And what's interesting about this is the things he's talking about, the giant ferrets, those are this. He's referring to a tringlet, which is this. This is Clin. Now, tringlets are based on pangolins, but guess what? Angel doesn't know what a fucking pangolin is. His first reference point is ferret. Now, what's happening here is Gingerbread has no idea what he is talking about when he says giant ferrets. So Z just skips over that completely and goes straight to explaining what chicory is. Chicory is a ferrax. Other important thing, Gingerbread uses emissary chicory, uses the full title, because to Gingerbread, oh, you got to use the full title for someone, while Angel met chicory in a less formal setting, and so it's just like, oh, it's chicory, that's that weirdo. So this is just like a smattering of like phrases and pieces of dialogue that show how these two characters are different, how their environments they grew up in were different, even though they get along just fine. So this is just some examples of things that I have done going forward, and we're going to talk more about dialogue again, I promise. As promised, I'm going to run you through my dialogue writing process in as close to real time as possible. So I've already worked out the characters, and in the parameters of the scene, I know this is going to be their meet cute. And what's happened just before that is A, basically wiped the floor with about 4 other people, like, that were way bigger than her, and she just destroyed them. So now I'm gonna try to work out the scene. And to be very clear, I am literally showing you how I write dialogue. This is not a dramatization of what's going on in my brain. This is what I literally do. Scene start. Okay. See here. What the fuck are you looking at? No. Are you fucking looking at me? No. No, I'm not looking at you. It's okay if you are. You don't need to hide it. Where are you looking at me? Okay, yeah, I was looking at you. Why were you looking at me? You said it was okay if I was looking at you. Okay, that'd be funny. I'm gonna write that part down. I wrote it down. It's on the screen now. So there's gonna be like a pause there, I think. Because it's gonna be like, yes, you're looking at me, and she's not gonna know how to respond to that. She's gonna be like, she's gonna look him up and down and be like, don't want to pick a fight with this person. They're not worth it. Not worth my time. So, are you a merchant or a privateer? I'm a doctor. See, that's gonna shut her down. That's gonna shut her down because in this setting, you don't fuck with doctors. So now you can see these are like the literal words I just spoke to myself. So now I have to think through the blocking. These are the words they say. What does that look like if it was on like stage and you were watching it? Now this part I did have to cut the camera out, otherwise I would have gone over the TikTok limit. But you see, I just added, so here's all the dialogue I just acted out. I describe her, character A, noticing character B looking at her. I throw in descriptors of what the speech sounds like. I throw in descriptions of how her mouth moves. It's all from character B's perspective, so it's a lot of noticing what she is doing. I show changes in her voice. I put in some action of her moving across the room to meet him, so it's not just this conversation shouted across a bar. So if you're looking for a technique because you're struggling, theater kid it out and see if it helps.